All right, so I think we can get going now. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this short lunchtime webinar on getting started with MyCPD. For anybody who doesn't know me or hasn't met me before, I'm Natalie Michaud. I'm the Standards Manager at the GOC and the CPD Review Project Lead. I have here with me today Joanne Abbott, who is our CPD Project Manager. And behind the scenes, we've got our communications team, ably led by Kat and Vikram, and our CPD operations manager, Joy Bolt. So just to get started, next slide, please. Just wanted to run through very quickly what we're going to be talking about today. So the first item on the agenda is welcoming you all, as I am doing at the moment. And from there, we're just going to give a quick summary of the main changes. For those of you that are on the webinar who perhaps haven't engaged with our material around CPD previously, we think it would be good to give you a bit of a rundown as to what the main changes are in the move from CET to CPD. And then following that, Joanne will talk to you about how to complete your PDP, and we'll show a couple of short videos from Joanne on how to log both provider-led points on your CPD record and how to log self-directed points as well. We'll finish up with some answers to frequently asked questions that we've had recently into the CPD inbox. Hopefully the answers will help everybody who's on the call today. But if there are any further questions, next slide, please. If there are any further questions that aren't answered by this webinar, either ask them in the Q&A section as part of this webinar, and we will answer them offline. Obviously, it's a short webinar today, so we won't be able to answer anything online, unfortunately. Or you can drop us an email at cpd@optical.org and the team will get back to you. So I think first we're going to show you a short video about the main changes. So please, if we can press play on that.
CET will become CPD from the 1st of January 2022. CPD stands for Continuing Professional Development and is designed to help you build upon your existing skills and develop new ones. Here are the main things that you need to know about CPD. CPD will run in 3-year cycles, and you will need to obtain the same number of points as you did under CET. So 36 points for optometrists, dispensing opticians and those with contact lens specialty, and 54 points for specialty prescribing optometrists. You will obtain your points across 4 core domains: professionalism, communication, clinical skills, and leadership and accountability. If you hold specialty registration, you will also need to get points from a 5th specialty domain. You can now count relevant learning from other sources towards your CPD points total. All registrants will need to undertake 1 peer review per cycle, including dispensing opticians. All registrants will also need to complete a reflective exercise once per cycle, looking back at their learning and development throughout that cycle. You will be responsible for logging details of your CPD on your MyCPD account. Doing this is simple, and you can look up details of CPD you attended to make it even easier. More information about CPD and what you'll need to do to meet our requirements is in our guide for registrants, which you can find on our website.
Thanks for that. Oh, there we go. Next slide, please. Brilliant. So the main changes to CPD from CET to CPD set out there. 1.2 note that isn't included in that video is that providers will no longer upload details of points to the system on your behalf. So this is something that you as registrants will have to do. You'll have to log your own points on your account. This is in line with other regulated professions who do require and have for some time their registrants to maintain their own CPD records. So that's bringing us into alignment with other healthcare professionals as well as other regulated professionals. So I think if we move on to talking about your PDP, an important first part of the CPD cycle, getting that done, and Joanne will talk to you about that. So just to hand over to Joanne now.
Thank you, Natalie. So as you said, we're going to just walk through here how to complete your personal development plan. Next slide, please. The purpose of your plan is to provide a framework to help you reflect on your professional experiences, skills, and knowledge. It will help you to identify areas in which you may need or want to develop your skills. It helps to determine what learning is needed and helps set out your individual agenda for CPD activities to undertake. Your personal development plan will align with your 3-year CPD cycle, but of course your career path or learning needs may change over that time, and we encourage you to regularly revisit your plan to make sure that it still suits your needs. We suggest that you do this at least at the start of every year, or even more often if needed, and you can upload new plans to your MyCPD account whenever is necessary. Next slide. So why do you need to complete a PDP? Well, the personal development plan is a requirement for all registrants, and it provides a personal roadmap to your learning needs and CPD activities. You should complete a PDP and upload a personal development plan within your 3 months of first logging into MyCPD. And this will be used in your reflective exercise, which will be undertaken by all registrants in the last 6 months of the CPD cycle. The plan is intended for your own use. However, the GOC may ask to view your PDP to ensure that you're planning CPD appropriate for your scope of practice and your development needs. Any information you upload to MyCPD may be viewable by the GOC if you're selected for registrant review, but it will not be used in any fitness to practice proceedings. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do you complete a PDP? Well, when you first log into your MyCPD, you'll be asked to read the PDP guidance, which provides details on how to complete your PDP. You can download a copy of the guidance and a blank PDP template from the support page within the CPD, or in that first login page, you'll also see links to download those documents. Of course, you can always use your own template or one provided by your professional body or employer, but you must ensure that you upload a completed PDP to your MyCPD account. Next slide. The PDP guidance goes into fuller detail of what you'll need to consider, but essentially there are 3 different stages involved in completing your personal development plan. And these, as you can see on the screen there, are analyse, identify, and plan. In the analyse stage, you'll need to consider where you are currently in your professional role and career and what your development needs are. Think about your strengths and weaknesses. Are there any gaps in your knowledge? To help you fully analyse your areas of development, you could use a previous personal development plan or create a SWOT analysis to consider your strengths, weaknesses, threats and opportunities, or alternatively discuss your needs with your colleagues or your line manager. A SWOT analysis grid is provided in the PDP guide for registrants. Once you've analysed your development needs, you'll need to identify what learning outcomes you wish to achieve and why these are important to your development and how they relate to your scope of practice. Applying SMART objectives or goals will ensure that your learning outcomes are focused. Again, this is covered in more detail in the guidance, but essentially SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relatable, and time-bound. It's important to have the time-bound element, as that makes your achievements realistic. The final stage is to plan how you're going to achieve your learning outcomes. People learn in different ways, and it's important that you choose a method of learning or professional development that suits your professional development needs and preferred learning style. Think about what CPD or learning you've undertaken in the past. What method of learning works best for you? Is the learning outcome best achieved through provider-led or self-directed CPD, through hands-on or theory-based learning? And you may need to think about more than one method of learning to achieve some of your learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So next we're coming on to filling in your PDP. I've realised that this slide might be a little bit small for you to see the specific wording on here, but it shows the downloadable template from the GOC, and also an overview of part of the text in the guidance as well. So do look at that guidance if you want to sort of see that in finer detail. But when you've completed the 3 learning planning stages, you'll be ready to start filling in your PDP, adding extra lines as necessary. Learning outcomes are specific to your needs, and we suggest that you set at least 4 or 5 over the 3-year cycle. But of course, you might need to add more as your development needs change. The final column in the plan, which is how has this impacted my practice, is to be completed when you have achieved the learning outcome. And you may find looking at your reflection statements useful in understanding how the learning has impacted your practice. Do remember that your PDP should reflect your own and current development needs, and you may need to revisit this and revise as necessary over the 3-year cycle. Next slide. As always, if you have any further questions on completing your PDP, do look at the guidance first of all, but if you do have any further questions, then please do get in touch with us. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. If we just move on then to the next slide, and that will be showing us some videos on how to upload points to your MyCPD account.
In this short video, I'm going to talk you through how to add points to your MyCPD account. Once you've logged into MyCPD, you'll be brought to the overview screen, and here you'll see 4 different tiles across the centre of the screen: Plan, Record, Reflect and Search. It's via the Record button that you will record your points on your MyCPD account. Alternatively, you can do so also via the Add CPD Points tab at the top of the screen. Note that if you're viewing this screen on a mobile device or a device with a smaller screen, that you might need to scroll up or down or left to right to see all of the tile options. So we're going to go ahead and click onto the Record button to add the points to the CPD account. And that will take you through to the CPD statement screen. Here you'll see any CPD that you've already added to your account, but also you'll be able to view your CPD requirements, what you've attained and what you still have left to meet with the requirements. So to add points, we're going to click on the Add CPD Points blue button. And that will take us through to the screen with 2 different options. The first is to add points from provider-led CPD, and the second is to add points from self-directed CPD. Note that all points that you attain through approved providers must always be recorded as provider-led CPD and never as self-directed CPD. In this example, we've got points to add from an approved provider, so I'm going to click on that button first of all. And that takes us through to step 1 of finding the CPD to add to my CPD record. And you'll see there are a number of different search options within this screen. You can either search by the 6-digit reference number, the title or part title if you know it, the location and the date. You don't need to fill in all of these boxes to search for the CPD. If you know just the number or the title, you can just enter those and then hit the search button at the bottom. In this particular example, I know the number, so we're going to search with the number first of all. So I've entered that 6-digit number and we press the search button at the bottom. Now I need to scroll down the screen a little. And there you can see that it's brought up an option with that correct CPD number, the 6-digit reference number. And I need to click onto the blue Choose button to add that to my CPD record. Now in step 2, you need to confirm that this is indeed showing the right piece of CPD. And you'll need to check that you have the right title, the right number, and the session is as you're expecting. For all approved provider CPD, you're encouraged to complete a reflection statement, or to alternatively add a reflection template that you've completed, and you can add that as a file in this screen. You're also required to upload some evidence that you've completed the CPD, and this can be a certificate of completion from the provider, an email or a letter of confirmation, or it could also be some notes of the CPD that you've taken, and these can be uploaded with the evidence here. You'll need to select a completion date, and for all approved provider CPD, you'll need to provide some feedback on the quality of the CPD and how it met your expectations on the on what was described for the session, and you can add your comments there. If you make any comments here, these do not reflect on your ability to add CPD to your record. These comments are always provided anonymously to the CPD provider. When you've completed all of those fields, then click on the Add to MyCPD statement, and that will add this piece of CPD to your record. I'll now walk you through the steps required to add self-directed CPD to your MyCPD account. From the overview screen, again, we have those two different options of adding CPD. You can either add via the record tile or via the Add CPD Points tab at the top of the screen. In this particular example, I'm going to add points via the tab at the top of the screen. So I'm going to click on Add CPD Points. And that'll take us straight to the screen with those two buttons again. So you've got the first button for adding provider-led CPD and the second button for adding points from self-directed CPD. And it's that second button that we need this time round. You'll see that the screen is very different for adding CPD from self-directed CPD as opposed to provider-led CPD. And for this, you'll need to give your own details of the session. You'll need to give your CPD a title, let us know what date you completed the CPD on, what format the CPD was, the provider's details, and a short description of the CPD that you have completed. So in this particular example, we're going to go ahead and give our CPD a title. So let's say the registrant attended a lecture on OCT imaging. And it was completed on Friday the 4th of February. Now the format for the CPD, there are 6 different options for self-directed CPD. And you can find out a little bit more about those different types of formats by looking at the guidance on self-directed CPD formats. And that's either accessed via the question mark here or via the More Options tab and the CPD support screen at the top of the page. This particular example is a lecture, and that falls under the formal learning format of CPD. So we're going to select formal learning. The provider was, in this particular example, the local hospital, so one of the optometry team at the local hospital. Let's call him Mr. Smith. Put in the details of where the CPD was completed. You can also provide any details of websites or email addresses or such like here as well. You'll need to provide a brief description of the CPD that you completed. So now, here we know that it was a lecture. Provide as much detail as you can in this description here, and that will help you with coming back on to do your reflections later on the CPD that you have completed. You'll need to state how long the CPD took to complete, and this particular session took an hour to complete, which has given us 1 CPD point. Now, if you select a 30-minute duration, then this will only give you 0.5 of a CPD point. So you can see that there's a correlation between the time taken to complete the CPD and the number of CPD points. But this one was an hour of duration, so we know it's 1 CPD point to be awarded. You need to declare whether it was an interactive CPD or not. Now, this particular example of a lecture, there was an option to interact with the lecturer themselves and other participants. So yes, this was an interactive mode of CPD. And you'll need to confirm if it is interactive, what type of interaction was achieved. And through a lecture, this was a physical attendance where you had the option to be face-to-face with others and to receive direct feedback. So that is the correct option here. And then we click the next button once all of those fields are completed. Now the next screen, step 3, we need to declare what domains were covered by the CPD completed. And to find out a little bit more about the domains, you can have a look at the appendix in the Registrant's Guide to CPD, which will list a little bit more in detail of the standards of practice that are mapped to these different core domains. Now, the ECT imaging in the example aligns with clinical practice, so that is the domain we're going to select here. Note you can select a maximum of 2 core domains for self-directed CPD, and then we click the next button again. Now, for all self-directed CPD points, you do need to complete a reflection statement or to upload a reflection statement that you've completed elsewhere. And this can be done via the Add Files button here. You'll also need to upload evidence that you've completed the CPD as you did with provider-led CPD. Now, obviously, you're not going to have always a certificate of completion, but you might have an email or a letter of confirmation from the host of the CPD. If neither of those options apply, then you might want to think about other ways of evidencing your CPD that you've completed. And that might be in the form of notes that you've taken from a session or discussion notes that you've carried out with other colleagues. And you can add those files here, but they are compulsory. So once your files have been added, you'll then need to click the next button, and that will add your CPD to your record.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joanna, for that very helpful rundown of how to log the different types of points on the MyCPD system. We thought we would close the webinar with a couple of answers to some frequently asked questions that we've had in the CPD inbox over the course of the last few weeks since we've launched the MyCPD portal. Hopefully some of you may have your own questions answered by the answers to these. And if not, of course, you are more than welcome to submit questions either via the Q&A here or to the CPD inbox itself. So next slide, please, and we'll go on to our first question. So the first question here, I completed a piece of CPD that was worth 2 points, but when I log it, only 1 point shows on my account. Why? Could be a number of reasons for this. The most common one that we've seen so far is that people have accidentally logged points as self-directed CPD rather than provider-led. And as Joanne advised in the walkthrough, self-directed CPD of an hour or above's duration is only worth a maximum of 1 point, with the exception of peer review. So it's capped at 1 point. So if you've logged a piece of provider-led CPD that was worth more than that, accidentally as self-directed, it will show up as 1 point. If you're absolutely certain that you've logged it as provider-led and it's still showing as fewer points than you expected it to show as, contact the provider themselves, and they will be able to advise you on how many points the piece of CPD is actually worth. So next slide, please. What counts as evidence for self-directed CPD? I mean, Joanne spoke to this a little bit in the walkthrough, but essentially what we're looking for from you as evidence that you've completed self-directed CPD. And just as a reminder, self-directed CPD is any relevant learning to your professional practice that isn't delivered as CPD by a GOC CPD approved provider. What counts as evidence that you've completed it? Because maybe you won't have a certificate if it's independent learning, or if it's supervision of a new grad or something like that. Essentially, all we want from you is evidence that you've actually engaged with the material that you've said you've engaged with. So in the form of, let's say, if you've read an article in a journal or something like that, and kind of reflect on that and thought about it, a picture of the journal won't be enough, because that's not really evidence that you've read it. What is, or what might be, is the notes that you've taken on your reading of that article, or the reflection that you've undertaken. Similarly, if you go to a lecture, for example, your lecture notes, they don't have to be in any particular formal or coherent order. We're not expecting reams and reams of paper. It might be, just the key points that you scribble down, but anything that demonstrates that you've engaged with the material at hand would be suitable evidence for self-directed CPD. Next slide, please. So I want to run a registrant-led peer review. How do I apply for approval? Quite a few people have contacted us with this query, saying that they've not seen on the website on the MyCPD website how to do this. The short answer is that you don't have to anymore, because registrant-led peer review now counts as self-directed CPD. So that's the only form of self-directed CPD that is worth more than 1 point. It's worth 3 points, as all peer reviews are worth 3 points. You don't have to apply for approval in advance. Just go forth and have the session. We would encourage you to plan it in the same way that you would have done under CET, and to make sure it's properly facilitated. And obviously, if you've logged a registrant-led peer review that had 1 person in it, if you are picked up at registrant review, we might have something to say about that, because it's not much of a peer review if there's only 1 person going. So make sure you've got sufficient numbers, make sure you can have a good discussion, and that it's planned and logged, and you know what the subject matter is going to be in advance. But otherwise, just run it yourselves. That's absolutely fine. If you're not comfortable with registrant-led peer review, and that's understandable, there will be provider-led peer review for you to take up as well. Next slide, please. I cannot find a CPD I've undertaken in the CPD search. Why is this? Again, a couple of reasons. The most common we've encountered so far is that providers themselves have not made the CPD viewable on the MyCPD search. So if you've tried searching by all the different criteria individually, as Joanne set out in the walkthrough, and it's still not working, do revert to the provider. If not, just try searching by one of the other possible search terms, for example, the name rather than the number, or something like that. Next slide, please. I'm an independent prescriber and used to log my prescribing decisions on MyCET. Can I still do so on MyCPD? The answer to this is unfortunately not, as independent prescribing decisions logging isn't part of the CPD system. It's no longer available on MyCPD. So if you wish to record those prescribing decisions, you will need to do that elsewhere. And next slide, please. I need access to my previous CET records. Can I see these on MyCPD? Yes, you can, from the previous cycles. If you scroll to the bottom of your dashboard, there should be an option for you to view your CET records on there. If you've had a look through that platform and you can't find it, and this certainly might be the case if you're viewing on mobile or tablet or something with a smaller screen, make sure you do scroll to the very bottom to be able to see it properly. That's the bottom of your CPD statement that you would see that. And then we have a question here. When I try to upload evidence to MyCPD, I get an error message saying the file is too big. What should I do? The short answer is see if there are any alternative files that might demonstrate evidence of having completed that piece of CPD. As you'll appreciate, we have many, many registrants who will be wanting to upload evidence. And so, for example, photo files tend to be very large, and the system can't cope with too many photo files, because that obviously takes up a very large amount of storage and means that the system runs much more slowly. So to make the system run optimally and to take the minimum amount of time possible for you to upload your points, try and stick to maybe Word file formats where they're appropriate, so emails and things like that, lecture notes, certificates, etc. Only upload photos if you absolutely need to and there's no other option for you to provide proof of that. Next slide, please. So that was a very quick run. I appreciate we've run over by 2 minutes, and apologies for that. But we've given you a very quick rundown there of what you need to do to get started with MyCPD. If you've any questions that haven't been answered by this webinar, not including the ones that are in the question and answer section, I can see we've got quite a few, and we will revert to you all individually on those offline. But if you've got a question that you haven't asked today or are not comfortable asking in this forum, then please do drop the team a line at cpd@optical.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. All that's left to be said really is thank you very much for your attendance today. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it helpful. And do get in touch if you've got any suggestions on further information that we can provide to make the transition from CET to CPD easy for you. But yeah, good afternoon to everyone, and thanks very much for your attendance.